Welcome back. We are now going to be talking about enzymes. So believe it or not, we're actually nearing the end of Unit 2. We've talked about cells, we've talked about biomolecules, and now we're going to finish off by talking about enzymes. Right, so today's aim, which you may notice is not on my screen right now, is actually what are enzymes? So the reason the aim is not currently on my screen is because today I'm actually going to show you guys the PowerPoint presentation that has all the information you need to know. So you're going to write what's on my screen onto your worksheet. It's the same information, it's just presented a little bit differently. So today's aim, what are enzymes? The good news is we don't have to look very far because I've got the answer right here. Enzymes are the controller of all chemical reactions in your body. So please go ahead and write that down on your worksheet. Enzymes are the controller of all chemical reactions in your body. All right, so starting off with today's do now. What is a chemical reaction? I want you to answer that question, press pause on this video, and then press play when you're ready to go over that answer together. So what is a chemical reaction? You should have said something along these lines. A chemical reaction is the change of a substance into a new one that has a different chemical identity, and it is often not reversible. So the key phrase here is a different chemical identity. And because of this, it is often not reversible. So for example, I've got an image here of an experiment that many of you guys might have seen online over the past few years, and that is when someone combined Mentos with Coke. Right, and sadly, this was supposed to be a GIF showing you what happens, but for some reason it didn't want to work today. So you'll have to use your imagination. So in this experiment, when someone combined Mentos with Coke, it actually caused an explosion. So that Coke caused a chemical reaction in those Mentos that caused them to explode. All right, and this is classified as a chemical reaction because it's not reversible, okay? Those Mentos have exploded. Unfortunately, they're not going to fit back inside the Mentos package anymore. We can't just stuff them back inside and carry on with our day. That is now going to be a liquid mess that's all over the pavement. So it turned those Mentos into a different chemical identity. It turned them into a liquid. And it's not reversible because they can't go back to what they looked like before. Okay. And okay, another chemical reaction you could have come up with is something like frying an egg. Okay, so when you take that liquid egg and put it on the skillet, it's going to turn into a solid. That can't go back the way it was before. I mean, you could stuff that fried egg back into the shell, but it's not going to be the same as it was before. So the key to chemical reactions is that it's changing into a different chemical identity, and it's often not reversible. So it can't go backwards to the way it was before. All right, moving on. So now we're going to read an introductory reading about enzymes. So I'm gonna, oh, well, I've already highlighted what we need to know, but let's go ahead and read this passage. All right, so what would happen to your cells if they made a poisonous chemical? You might think that they would die. In fact, your cells are always making poisonous chemicals. They do not die because your cells use enzymes to break down these poisonous chemicals into harmless substances. Enzymes are proteins that speed up the rate of reactions that would otherwise happen more slowly. The enzyme is not altered by the reaction. You have hundreds of different enzymes in each of your cells, and each of these enzymes is responsible for one particular reaction that occurs in the cell. So now, using what we just read, and specifically what I just highlighted, let's go back over and read about the answer. So what is an enzyme? You should have picked up that enzymes are proteins that speed up the rate of reactions that would otherwise happen more slowly. So the key here is, oh, we're still working on this, guys. Okay, so the key here is that they speed up those reactions. So these reactions would happen normally on their own. Enzymes just make them happen faster. So they speed them up. Number 2, are enzymes altered or changed after a chemical reaction? The answer is no. So these enzymes aren't used up by the reaction. They're actually recycled. So after they carry out one chemical reaction, they're just going to bounce over and do the same thing a different time. So they're never altered or changed. They're going to be reused constantly. All right, moving on. So enzymes, you should have already written down that enzymes are the controller of all chemical reactions in your body. And the way those chemical reactions happen is demonstrated below. So once again, this was supposed to be a moving GIF, but we're going to make do with what we have. So we have an enzyme, and then we have these two things called substrates. And you might notice that these substrates are the same shape as this missing space in the enzyme. So what has to happen is these substrates are going to come down and fit into these puzzle pieces that are missing in the enzyme. And in the second that that substrate connects with the enzyme, that is what causes the chemical reaction to occur. So that is what causes that chemical reaction to speed up, okay? So those substrates fit in with the enzymes, and then the magic happens, okay? But then we know that the enzyme is not used up, so that enzyme's actually just going to bounce out and do the same thing again and again and again. And you guys will get more practice with this in the upcoming days, so don't be too stressed about it right now. All right, so let's learn some more about chemical control. So at all times, there are billions of chemical reactions happening in any organism. So right now, you guys are sitting here. There could be billions of chemical reactions happening inside of you, and you don't even know it. So all organisms need to control these chemical reactions that make up something called metabolism. So you may have heard one of your friends say before that they've got a really fast metabolism, or they have a really slow metabolism. And when they say that, they're usually talking about how fast or slow their body breaks down food or uses energy, right? And that's because metabolism, I'm dying, is actually the sum of all of the chemical processes that occur inside of your body. Okay, so metabolism is the sum of all of the chemical reactions. So all of the chemical reactions happening inside a living organism. So if your friend's talking about having a fast or slow metabolism, that's just talking about how fast or slow those chemical reactions are happening inside of them. Right? Enzymes are the principal regulators of most chemical activity. When we talk about regulators, we're talking about they have a certain control over those chemical reactions. So they control how fast or how slow those chemical reactions happen. And therefore, enzymes control chemical reactions, and so they control metabolism. So if you have a slow metabolism, blame your enzymes. Like me, those enzymes are not going as fast as they should be. So enzymes control chemical reactions and control your metabolism. And once again, metabolism just means all of the chemical reactions that are currently happening inside your body. All right. There are over 2,000 known enzymes, each of which is involved with one specific chemical reaction. So this is actually super important. So each enzyme has one job, and that one specific chemical reaction is determined by their shape. So their function is actually determined by their shape. Okay, moving on. So what else do we need to know? We need to know that enzymes are proteins. So because they are proteins, that means they are made up of amino acids. Okay. Another thing you need to know, enzymes are referred to as organic catalysts. And catalyst is just a fancy way of saying that they speed up the rate of chemical reactions. So catalysts can be inorganic or organic. Remember, that means that they control or contain carbon and hydrogen. Substances which speed up the rate of chemical reactions. So catalysts speed up the rate of chemical reactions. All right, and two examples of chemical reactions, you don't need to know this, but you might hear something called dehydration synthesis or hydrolysis. Those are both examples of chemical reactions that are sped up by enzymes. All right, moving on. So what do we need to know about the structure of enzymes? Okay, so enzymes are large complex proteins. Again, they're made out of amino acids. So all enzymes are either all protein or are proteins with non-protein parts called coenzymes. And coenzymes are often vitamins. So you actually don't need to write this down on your paper because most of the enzymes that we will be working with are going to be fully protein. Okay, so don't worry about coenzymes just yet. All right, and what do we need to know about this picture? So I don't believe this picture is on your notes, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to look at this image and take a screenshot of it because you will be using it again. Okay, so in this picture, we have a substrate and an enzyme. And on this enzyme, there's going to be something called an active site. And that active site is actually where the substrate is going to settle down into. Again, you might notice that this substrate and enzyme have the same exact pattern. So they have to have complementary shapes. And when we say complementary shapes, that means that they're actually going to fit together like puzzle pieces. Okay, so that enzyme and that substrate, which is what the enzyme is working on, are going to come together and fit together perfectly, just like you see right here. And that makes them form what we call the enzyme substrate complex, which just means that the enzyme and the substrate have connected. All right, and we call this the lock and key model. And we call it that because just like you have to have a specific shape of key to enter to open a lock, the enzyme has to be a specific shape to match up with the correct substrate. So you can't just take any regular key and just fit it into someone else's door, right? Like your key is not going to open your neighbor's door. And that's for a specific reason. The same thing happens with enzymes and substrates. They have to be the same shape in order to work. If you try to connect, let's see, this enzyme with this substrate, that's not going to work. In fact, they have to be complementary shapes. So if we have a substrate or an enzyme that looks like this, our substrate would have to look like this. So their shape is going to determine their function. If that shape doesn't match up, the chemical reaction will not occur. All right, moving on. So enzymes are named according to the substrate that they are specific to. So again, the substrate is what they are working on. So what the enzyme connects with. Substrates are the chemicals that each enzyme acts upon. So an example of naming. The enzyme maltase, which is an enzyme, breaks down or acts upon the disaccharide maltose, which is the substrate, into two monosaccharides. That is spelled wrong. It's not monosaccharides, it's monosaccharides, okay? That's ugly. Oh, go back. Ah! All right, we're making do. So this naming system is actually super helpful because if you have the name of an enzyme, you can actually figure out what it's working on. So what's its job? So in this example, we're given that the enzyme is called maltase. You can always pick out what the enzyme is because it's almost always going to end in ASE. So in this example, maltase works on maltose. So they're named almost identically except for that ending. And this is actually super helpful because whenever something ends in OSE, that means it's a sugar. So ASE is enzyme, OSE is sugar. So maltase works on the substrate maltose. It's the beginning of the, oh my word. Okay, and another example of this, the enzyme peptidase, again, we know this is an enzyme because it ends in ASE, breaks down the peptide bonds in proteins. So again, peptidase works to break down peptide bonds. So those enzymes are named according to what their job is. All right, I'm actually gonna write that down. So named according to the substrate they are specific to / what their job is. So hopefully you guys have figured out that usually enzymes end in ASE. This is not always going to be the case, but 9 times out of 10, enzymes are going to end with ASE. All right, and that is all that I have for you today. So what I want you guys to do now, at the end of your worksheet, you might have noticed that I attached a separate video that I would recommend you watching. This link will take you to an Amoeba Sisters video that talks about enzymes. I would recommend watching it. It's only 5 minutes, and I think it'll help you guys a lot. So watch this 5-minute video, and then as soon as you are done with that, complete your exit ticket. I've noticed that some of you are forgetting to turn in your exit ticket, so I would recommend remembering to start turning them in as they affect your grade pretty substantially. So 2 things for you to do: watch the Amoeba Sisters video, complete this exit ticket, and actually 3, because I want you to turn in these notes as well. All right, that's all I have for you today. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys soon.